Law defines chicha as something in the process of fermentation, so it would be still slightly sweet and sparkling because of fermentation. Cider is a finished product, and usually with not a wild fermentation, but using special yeast to get a more refined product.
Hello, my name is Ria Windcaller, and I am the producer and cider MC of this weekly podcast, where we speak with makers, cider enthusiasts, and folks within the cider trade from around the world. Bringing us into episode 486 of Cider Chat was Jose Antonio Alcalde. He is a professor in Chile, just a renowned person, speaker on the subject. You're going to be hearing more about who he is, what he does in Chile, because this is a pre-recorded presentation from CiderCon 2025 that was held in Chicago. And that was last January. We're coming up to CiderCon again here in Providence, Rhode Island. And it's an amazing presentation. So last week's episode we had with Carlos Flores on the edible forest, which is in Chile. And this week we are hearing from this amazing panel, this discussion of folks who came up from Chile, attended CiderCon, and did a presentation about the culture, Chicha, as you're hearing the professor speak on that topic. And also getting into the different regions. There's 3 primary regions that we're going to be hearing about: the apple varieties, the history of cider making, and the future of cider in Chile. So I have my glass already here. If you're on the YouTube channel for Cider Chat, you'll see me holding this bottle up here, which is from Chiloé, which is the island of Chiloé. And this is made by a cooperative, all women. And it's a lovely, lovely cider. It's one of the ciders that was served at CiderCon during this panel discussion. And so I'm getting primed up for this. This is an amazing episode. All the slides are synced with the audio from the presentation, so you get to enjoy that if you're subscribed to the Cider Chat YouTube channel. If you haven't yet subscribed, then this is a good time to do that. And if you don't know who I am, my name is Ria Windcaller. I am the Cider MC, sometimes known as Cider Delilah, because I connect people all over the world. And myself. It's just a joyous position to be in. And I've been doing this podcast since 2015, the fall of 2015. I've been involved in cider, going back to pre-1994, teaching cider making for about 17 years, creating events, doing all that kind of jazz, and also working other full-time job, of course, because, that's another story. Anyways, back in 2015, I launched this podcast, and we're now in season 10. We're coming up to 500 episodes. Whew. And this has led me on this amazing journey here, meeting you out there in Ciderville more often than I could ever possibly hope for. So, and that's a good thing. That's a compliment. Anyways, I'm going to have to get my headphones on here, get a little geared up. We're going to take a break. And when I come back, I have a wee bit of news from out and about in Ciderville. Coming up the first week of February is CiderCon. That's going to be taking place in Providence, Rhode Island. And this particular episode, the feature presentation, was recorded last year at CiderCon in Chicago. It's always an experience. And the year before was in Portland, Oregon. That was what we called like IceCon. It was what an amazing trip. Oh my God. That blew me away. No one who attended that CiderCon in Portland will ever forget that. I guarantee you. And each year is an experience. And certainly last year was amazing, getting to hang out with the Chilean panel, getting to record that. Last week's episode was one of the panelists that you'll be hearing is Carlos Flores. He did an amazing talk on the edible forest, which is, again, at the Cider Chat YouTube channel. You can see the full presentation. Just a magnificent presentation. Highly recommend listening and watching that. This year, we're in Providence, Rhode Island, so it's on the East Coast, and they're always kind of moving it along. And it is the annual trade conference for CiderCon. So do check it out. I hope you can make it. It's both for cider enthusiasts and folks in the cider trade. And people are coming in from other parts of the world. I'm not sure quite where, but once we get there, we'll find out. So that's taking place in February. Then, as I said, this is wassail time. I'm seeing the events everywhere. I think this weekend I have a wassail event, so I'm really looking forward to that. And that is a magnificent time to gather in the orchard, sip cider, sing songs, and bring celebration and good fortune for the season to come for the orchard. So, yes, wassail is happening now. Then we roll into April, and I'm going to be heading to the Cider Salon in Hungary. That is being really spearheaded by Antje Gergely of the Ablaget Garden Project. Highly recommend you follow her on Instagram. I just saw her doing like a toboggan down a hill in the middle of the night. Oh, Antje, she's just an amazing person. That's going to be quite an event. So that's going to be taking place April 18th. Do follow her online. Then straight after that, I'm going to be heading to the UK to lead the UK cider tour. We're calling it Blossom Time because that is the peak blossom time for the orchards there. And fingers crossed that the harmonic convergence all works together, so we're just covered in the aroma of blossoms everywhere. The bouquet, both in our glass and out of the glass, will be there, and hanging out with some cool people. We have folks attending this from both Canada and the U.S. I'm totally psyched about that. There's still seats available, so do check it out at the Totally Cider links at ciderchat.com. So you could get all the info there. And then in the fall is the French Cider Tour. The first one was led in 2018, and then there's been a number of French Cider Tours since. And this is an epic tour. Look, we're going to have a dinner with Eric Bordelais. That's always kind of like our premiere at the end. But everything leading up to that, hanging out with Etienne Dupont of Domaine Dupont, Agathe Letier of Manoir d'April, going to a generational farm. 14 generations and counting have been part of this farm. That's with the Giard family. And then going to St. Malo and Mont Saint Michel, which is a World UNESCO Heritage Site. The French tour is mind-boggling. That is also going live now for reservations. So if you want any information on any of the Totally Cider tours, send an email to info@ciderchat.com.
Walking through the orchards.
It's time now for our featured presentation, pre-recorded at CiderCon 2025. You'll be brought into this episode by Eli Shanks, who I believe is currently working in the U.S. as a cider maker. He is also in collaboration with Punto de Fierro, working with Carlos Flores there, who is also on the panel. You'll hear from Rene Galindo from Tenkai Sidra and Fabian Lara, who is a brewer, a fermenter, and works with the Ministry of Agriculture, I believe in the financial department. He collaborates with Rene, making some ciders. You'll hear a little bit about that. You're going to be hearing from Gisela Gonzalez. She is the president of the Chiloé Cooperative, and that is on the island of Chiloé. We'll also hear from Jose Antonio Alcalde. He is a professor who is going to be bringing us right into some of the history, and it's just absolutely fascinating. So without further ado, let's all grab a glass and join this chat, pre-recorded once again at CiderCon 2025, and it was titled Chilean Cider, Honoring Rich Traditions.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Chilean panel. I'm going to start by introducing all of our speakers today. First, my name is Eli Shanks. I'm co-founder of Punta de Fierro Fine Cider in Valdivia, Chile, and I'm currently the head cider maker at Western Cider in Missoula, Montana. First, we have Gisela, who is president of the Cooperative Chiloé, which is a cooperative of 16 families on the island of Chiloé in the south of Chile. We have Rene Galindo, who is a third-generation cider maker who lives and works on his family's orchard in Truf Truf in the Araucanía region of Chile. Next, we have Carlos Flores, who is co-founder of Punta de Fierro Fine Cider and owner and manager of a 130-year-old orchard in Valdivia, Chile. Next, we have Fabian Lara. Fabian is a cider and beer consultant. He also works in INDAP, which is the Chilean Ministry of Agriculture's Small Family Farms Outreach Program. It is very important, supporting all of the farmers who make this cider possible, who protect the apples that you're going to hear about today. And so we're very happy to have Fabian with us, not only representing the government, but also as a cider maker. He's also the cider maker for Tercer Ciclo, which is one of the ciders that you have in front of you. And finally, but definitely not least, we have Jose Antonio Alcalde, professor from the University of Católica, and one of the most influential people in Chile when it comes to fermenting beverages. Pretty much anybody who's fermented in Chile has gone to one of his courses. And he will be presenting today a presentation about Chilean apples, the history of cider in Chile. Once his presentation is concluded, we will present each of the ciders and tell you a little bit about them.
Thank you, Eli. Chile, as you know, is in South America, a long country between the Pacific Ocean to the west, the Andes and Argentina to the east. And we could see Chile as a mirror image of the US West Coast, including Canada and also part of Mexico, the Peninsula de Cortés. Around latitude 40 south, we have three regions of cider making. From north to south, the area of Araucanía, which Temuco would be the city in the center of that area. The region of Los Ríos, where Valdivia is the capital. And then the region of Los Lagos, where the big island of Chiloé is, where Gisela is representing that area. This special big island, in fact, is an archipelago, where a lot of varieties of apples and different ecotypes are still present. We will go through origins, geography, varieties, production style, traditions, so we can sort out why Chilean cider is so special. As you all may know, domestic apple comes from Malus sibiersi in the Himalayas of China to the west. And through the Silk Route, it hybridized with two other wild species, Malus orientalis and Malus silvestris, until it reached Europe. Our apples come from Spain. We had them as early as 1570, via Peru mainly. That was the route that the Spanish colony would bring things down to Chile, rather than by the other side that was dominated by the Portuguese. A cold, rainy, temperate climate, modulated or defined by the Humboldt Current, a very cold current coming from Antarctica, would make apples flourish in that area of south of Chile until it became wild, so a lot of ecotypes were developed spontaneously. And this is different from other apple-growing areas of the southern hemisphere, such as Australia and New Zealand, where warm ocean currents would define their climate. We would see that temperature and rainfall makes Valdivia, the center of this cider production area, very similar to areas such as Oregon or the West Country. We would say that we have a bright summer with less rainfall, like in Oregon, and temperatures not as high, but more alike like the West Country. Apple arrived to give continuity to a long tradition of pre-Columbian elaboration of fermented beverages, which included many species that were replaced by apples in the southern area of Chile. Charles Darwin and Claude Gay documented big extensions of apple forests from which chicha was made by the Mapuche people of very good quality. With the years and centuries, cider became the staple drink in the southern part of Chile. In the northern or central part of Chile, it would be grape chicha. But then cider consumption declined because of the arrival of beer with German immigrants and a more industrialized production. So cider making remained only in rural areas until we can say it is reviving to become part of the craft movement. Orchards that have survived to our days, from north to south. The Biobío region, north of La Araucanía, we still find some trees in some orchards called quintas. Quintas are the small areas where trees are enclosed. We'll see why. Then Araucanía, we can see old trees still surviving. Los Ríos and Los Lagos, this is nearby the archipelago or by the seaside in big island of Chiloé. Apples, after 450 years since the arrival of apples to Chile, we can see a lot of variation in types. You see differences in shape, size, color, which also mean a huge variation in sweetness, tartness, tannin content, and flavor profile. A catalog from the most popular varieties in the big island of Chiloé is available online in Spanish for you to investigate. Big work has been done there to gather time of harvest, sizes, flavors, and most common uses for all these varieties. There are at least 17 varieties described, and it is still growing and much more to include in this catalog. Let's go through the steps in traditional cider making. Harvest is done manually by members of the family. Some people sell their apples for cider making. They don't make their own cider. Most people would produce their own apples and press them. Grinding and pressing is mostly done with self-made equipment, mixture of wooden equipment and metal. You can see there in the center a screw that is carved in very hard wood to operate old-style presses that are still in use. Hydraulic presses are also used and electrically operated. And as elsewhere, pressing is done with meshed bags, piled meshed bags. Then fermentation is done in different types of vessels. The finishing of traditional chicha or cider is made in PET bottles to get a sparkling, almost dried product, which is sold in those same containers. Some still cider is still made in barrels, made of native woods, mainly Raulí, a species that is native to Chile, Notophagus alpina, and Alerce, our redwood there that is one of the oldest species still alive in Chile. These are rustic, in-farm, and small scale. All family members are involved in some part of the production of cider. Chicha is well inserted into ethnic rites and festivities. Local people gather around rustic bars called chicherias. Cider is also sold in local markets in reutilized containers at prices as low as $1 per liter. But ciders, not only in these spaces I have described, is also growing as part of the gastronomy scene, opening opportunities for modern cider makers. So events where cider is the protagonist are growing steadily. And Chilean cider is opening to the world, participating in competitions, gaining good recognition in events like Cup or Sagardo Forum. So we think we have a future. I will ask Fabian to come and tell you what is the near future of Chilean cider. We have a competition coming, so he can explain to you.
Hi, everyone. In July, we have a competition in Chile, in the south, in Temuco. If you like to visit Chile, the first international competition for us, and the first only cider Latin American competition, and it's so happy that your cidery ship entries or you visit. Come to Chile, drink cider, cheap cider, and good cider.
July would be the date for the Pomum Cup.
It's the 17th to the 20th of July.
Fairs regarding cider in Chile are in our autumn, so it will be April and May. So if you are very anxious, you can go straight away. Chiloé has a wonderful cider and cheese week event the week before Easter. in the area of Chiloé. And Valdivia also has a good festivity where you can see all what has been happening for a long time. So we invite you to Chile. And Eli, please.
Yeah, the festival that we also participated in Valdivia was enormous. There were 18,000 visitors to the cider festival in Valdivia, Chile. So that's definitely a don't miss if you can make it. So now we're going to present a little bit about each of the ciders. I'm going to be doing a little bit of translating when necessary. We're going to start with Punta de Fierro, which is on the left here. Carlos is going to talk about how we make that.
Hello, hi everyone. Well, this is Punta de Fierro. It's a field blend that we made in the territory of Valdivia. We used the apple that we have, apple orchard. That apple orchard has more than 100 years old. And we worked together with the community, mainly women, for made this cider. The name, Punta de Fierro,
It's the common name.
yeah, colloquial name of one of the apples that we use in our blend. So it's still and also aged 2 years. Enjoy.
Thank you. Next, we have Muerte y Fría y Serena by Tencay. René Galindo is the owner and cider maker at Tencay. He's going to tell you a little bit about his cider.
Aló. Perdón por no hablar inglés. Eli me ayudará a la traducción.
Sorry that I don't speak English. Eli will help me with the translation.
Esta es una sidra inspirada en un kibbing.
This is a cider that's inspired by Kiving.
Es un monovarietal de manzana fierro.
It's a single variety cider from the manzana de Fierro apple.
Es una manzana amarga dulce de cosecha tardía.
It's a late harvest bittersweet apple.
El proceso es, para producirla, hago una maceración oxidativa con enzimas reveladoras de aromas.
In order to produce this cider, he does an oxidative maceration with enzymes that promote aromas.
Y luego el proceso de fermentación es espontáneo, fermenta con las levaduras nativas de la manzana.
Then he does a spontaneous fermentation with the yeast that is available on the apples.
Hago cierta parte, no todo el proceso completo del king, sino que solo, digamos, el chapeau.
The cider forms a chapeau blanc, but he doesn't do the entire process of keeving because the goal was a dry cider.
Y la carbonatación lo termino como un pet nat, pero hago de huelle a la volée.
So it was carbonated as a pet nat, and then it was disgorged.
Yes.
Enjoy.
Gracias.
Next, we have Gisela from the Cooperativa Chiloé. There's a W in it, Chiloé. It's not on the sheet, but there is. And she's going to tell you about her cider.
Buenos días.
Good morning.
La sidra que nosotros estamos haciendo en Chiloé tiene la característica de usar varios tipos de manzana por la zona.
The cider that we are making in the island of Chiloé has the characteristic of being made of multiple apples that are from that area.
Particularmente en la zona donde yo vivo, se destaca mucha abundancia de reineta, Grafenstein y otras manzanas un poco dulces.
In particular, in the area where I live, there are a lot of reineta and Gravenstein apples and other sweet apples.
Es una sidra natural que termina la fermentación en la botella.
It's a natural cider that finished its fermentation in the bottle.
Y este es un proyecto comunitario donde trabajamos con una cooperativa que agrupa a 16 familias de agricultores de la isla.
This is a community project that brought together 16 different families from the island of Chiloé to produce this together.
Eso.
Thank you. Finally, we have Fabián Lara, who made this, La Última Cosecha, the final harvest, and he's going to tell you a little bit about that cider.
Hello again. This is La Última Cosecha. La Última Cosecha is co-fermented product with honey and 4 varieties of apples, traditional heirloom apple variety from Chile, and have a back sweetening with same honey. It's a local honey, very special local honey in the Mapuche area from the indigenous people for this region. And have a secondary fermentation in bottles. Maybe you can see difference in clarity between the glasses. It's for like a not nut, but it's have a back sweetening and slightly put the sugar and Slow carbonation, and have a sweet, but not too sweet for us, and have a character of the char apples. Traditional, these apples is varieties for acidic, malic acid with a honey. This is the idea. Enjoy this.
While you are digging into those ciders, we want to open the floor for questions. When you ask your question, please specify if you're asking it for a specific person. We have Cristobal with us, if you want to wave to everybody. He'll be translating for the two panel members who don't speak English, so they will be getting your question, even if I'm not repeating it in Spanish. So are there any questions? Yes.
At what elevation are your orchards? I know wine in Chile often grows high in the mountains, so I was wondering at what elevation each of your orchards are. And my second question is about the barrels. And I think we all know what French oak and American oak does to cider, but what does Chilean oak do?
Well, that area elevation is not as ample, I would say. Closeness to the sea goes inland, is a thin country. But Oli grows, yes, at higher than 800 meters. What's about more than 2,000 feet high. But it's the mountains, this high is close to where the barrels are needed.
I can speak to our orchard in Valdivia. It's very close to sea level, but one of the other orchards we work with is in the same plantation, really, in the same group of different apple orchards, and it's a lot higher up in the same hill, and we are harvesting apples almost a month and a half later from the same varieties, just within the same area, which elongates a little bit the production cycle. As for the barrels, Rene is using barrels in his production, and I believe could speak to the effects that they may have on the cider.
Sobre las barricas, yo no soy, recién empecé a usar barricas hace poco.
I recently began using barrels
He
in my
usado,
production.
en este caso, barricas que tienen vino previamente, de roble francés, típica en Chile.
I was using a French oak barrel that previously had wine in it.
Bueno, algunas otras maderas especiales, como, que hayan contenido bourbon o algún tipo de whisky, pero creo que no soy el indicado.
Okay, he thinks he's not the one to answer this question because all his barrels are American and French oak that had whiskey in them.
Bueno, Fabián puede hablar sobre barricas. Él es
Okay,
maestro de
Fabian
barricas.
can answer the question about native Chilean woods.
The use of the Rauli good and another Chilean good is only for the container. Don't have the idea not is for aroma. Really, reuse many times to cider. It's only for preserve the microbe in the barrel to fermenting. Many people, the traditional people, make a cider with like a natural fermentation. How to say, and it's very important for the culture in the barrel, not for good aroma or good flavor, only container.
Elizabeth?
Could you explain to us the relationship between cider and chicha and the fully fermented apple brandy, and to also maybe touch on the cultural significance of that?
Yes. Chicha and cider are the same. Chicha is a name that the Spanish took it from Panama, and then they said all the beverages that they were knowing going down back to Chile would be called Chicha. So it's not a local name, but it's a name with which cider is known in that area. It's a little bit despective, like being a chichero is not like being a cider maker, but we want that to change so we can be proud of our chicha. And law defines chicha as something in the process of fermentation, so it would be still slightly sweet and sparkling because of fermentation. Cider is a finished product, and usually with not a wild fermentation, but using special yeast to get a more refined product. But we want that to change.
We can all speak from experience of having tried very good and completely fermented chichas, aged chichas. There's really, at the end of the day, no big difference between chicha and cider, except if you call yourself a chicha maker, it's because you come from a chicha making tradition, and that's the word that you use.
Like, what is kind of the general consumer perception of cider in Chile, I guess, would be my... And do you have to do much combating to have a higher value product?
We have all the same challenges that you deal with in the United States in terms of people not knowing what we mean when we say cider. plus the added difficulty of the fact that everyone who knows about Chicha associates cider with Chicha and associates it with costing $1 and being sold on the side of the road, and sometimes being very good, but sometimes being very not good. And so we have that additional difficulty, and for that reason, everyone who's on this panel has in some way or another tried to distinguish their product through packaging mostly. But yes, in order to be able to differentiate not only from every other type of alcohol that's on the shelf right now, but also from Chicha, everyone has made some kind of effort through design or through packaging in order to show that this is something that, in our case, took 2 years to make, or in another way differentiates it from Chicha.
I should also add that we are, as part of the craft movement, cider is entering the new consumers as new world ciders. So we're making the effort so traditional ciders are recognized and well appreciated, despite of having tannins and high tartness and all that. We don't want to lose that. So it's very difficult to educate the consumer in that sense, because they are getting good New World cider, very clean, like champagne in crafts, in beer bars. So that's also a huge challenge.
Question to the panelists are whether there are any specific varieties that they're really excited by, maybe making single varieties from, and what those apples are and what their characteristics are like.
I know that I can speak to, while they're figuring out what they want to share. We work with 13 different orchards. They're all female-run orchards that are around our orchard, and that's very normal, traditional, that the women run the orchards and the men make the chicha. So that's like a traditional division of labor that they have in the countryside in Chile. And one of the orchards has a whole row of the most tannic apples that I have been to the West Country. The most tannic apples that I have ever put in my mouth. You cannot even barely bite them. And we have a couple fermenters of that going right now. I would love to have enough volume to be able to do single variety trials for those ones, but they are something else. So for me, that's something that, to be clear, of the 200-something individual varieties that have been identified and isolated, most of them don't have names, so I also can't tell you what their names are.
Yeah. And it's really difficult because the people call the same name, but different varieties in Chile. For example, in the case of the limon or limona, we have a small limona and big limona. Obviously, it's another tree, obviously it's another variety, but the people call limona. And if you make with a single variety, really I ask what variety, really. But in the case, for example, La Última Cosecha is made with fierro, manzana fierro apple is very strong apple, have a sharp character, and slightly tannic, not too much the tannic character for this apple, and have a herbal aroma. And floral. This floral is mixed with the honey, obviously, but it's very traditional for this apple have this character. Really, in each region, the names is changing. I don't sure that is the right number of each region is same from the other. It's difficult, but the people in Chile multiply the apple varieties by seed, and have, for example, René found one apple is amazing for one cider, very tannic, but it's very different for the other varieties. The traditional orchard in Chile is like a wild orchard, and it's really many ciders mixed up for apple.
I would say that names to remember are limona, that you tried in the cider share. Fierro is also important. And camuesta. Camuesta is our bitter sharp, thinking of kieving and that kind of cider making. So those are the main. We would like to sort this out and so we can put names that everybody recognizes in Chile. But there's still some work to do on that.
The left bottom apple
se llama Cucha Cucha.
is called Cucha Cucha.
He probado hacer una sidra monovarietal con ese tipo de manzana.
I've tried a single variety version of that apple.
Crece cerca del mar, ella en la zona de la Araucanía, entonces tiene un poco de salinidad y bastante acidez. Entonces para método champenois es perfecto.
Okay, it grows by the ocean in the Araucanía region, and it picks up a lot of salinity, and it has high acidity, and he really likes it for the traditional method. The yellow apple on the bottom right
Se llama plátano, es bastante aromática y
It's called-
tiene mucho azúcar.
is called platano. It's very aromatic and has a lot of sugar.
Y bueno, la utilizo para hacer sidra de hielo. Y puedo hacer, concentra mucho grado Brix.
He uses it to make ice cider because it has crazy high bricks. The yellow apple in the photograph is limona, which was just mentioned.
También es una variedad ácida.
It's an acidic variety that is iconic in the Valdivia region. And the most special apple that he finds that he uses is the fierro. It's the last apple that you harvest, and it has more tannin than a lot of the other ones. And this Muerte Fría y Serena is a single variety of that variety. Thank you.
Do you all experience the combination of other chichas or other local fruit working itself into the cider as expressions of localities like maqui berries or anything along those lines blending into your cider? Or is it always just pure to the apple?
You know that Chile have many fruit production. The cherry is very typical. The berry is very typical from Chile. We also have many other different Chilean fruit, really. For example, in the case of the René uses strawberries in his cider. And the raisins, use the raisins. The use of the raisin is very traditional. The people put in the cocoa bottles. You say the photo of the cocoa bottles. The people put the raisin into to the gasification to can see this. But not is really traditional. In the case of the chicha, use other fruits. But Antonio say chicha is really colored for beverage, really. You can have a grape chicha or another chicha. But it's not traditional to mix it in the case of the chicha, the fruits, only apple chicha. But it now is also very interesting in Chile, the use of quince. Quince is very traditional for us, can eat directly, and using in cider too. This tannic and sharp character of the quince is very important to the balance many ciders. And in the case of the innovation, now the cidrerías, the cideries use another fruits, but not for newer styles cider. Now it's from the acidic for the fruits and all the fermentation. But now many people innovation with every. Antonio make a queen cider, for example.
I would say that for making rosé cider, maqui is used. You mentioned it. It's a berry that we have. It's high in tannins as well, and a lot of anthocyanins. I would like to link this with the workshop yesterday morning about tannins. Is that Southern Hemisphere has this ozone layer, and Chile has a very thin ozone layer. So if UV levels in the Northern Hemisphere are 6, in the south part of Chile, it's 10. So having clear days in summer increases UV, and with all the effect that we are studying about that, increasing anthocyanin production, but also other polyphenols.
You talked about how the apples had a Spanish origin, but many of them were planted from seed. Do we have any more information tracking the history of those apples and whether they were table or cider apples?
Yes, that's my passion, to discover that. We would have to go back to writers of those days describing in old Spanish. I wouldn't say that there would be eating apples or dessert apples as we know them today. I think those varieties have not more than 100 years, becoming big and juicy, and they were very soft in the pulp not too long ago. So apples arrived, they are described there. They don't talk about varieties, specific varieties. Nowadays they are linking Limona with Limón de Montes from Asturias. We don't think it is linked. It looks like, because of the size and the color, but being from the Pippin, it would be quite different from, or tracing back a lineage to that variety from Asturias would be very difficult. We then have varieties that arrived with the Germans. Grafenstein, I think it's also an important variety here. I've seen some ciders made with that single variety. It is all over the world. In Chile, it grows very much in a profile like Fuji apple, but has a very bad post-harvest conservation, so you have to press it soon. I think that the good thing about Chile is that we have all these ecotypes. The area of Chile made that cider apples survived better than table apples, and that people would be selecting them for cider making rather than for eating. But still, there are some varieties that are used. In Chiloé, they make empanadas with apples, and they have a special variety for that use. There are apples for strudel. Rennet variety also arrived to Chile. We don't think there is a linkage between Reineta, another important cider variety, with the German Rennet. So genetic studies are underway, so we will sort out what kind of lineages or big families are connected with these apples. But the important thing is that for about 300 years, Chile was closely linked to Spain and not open to other commerce. So we don't think we got other sources of apples rather than from Spain for 300 years or more. Then in the 19th century, other table or dessert apples began to arrive to Chile.
Pamela Viagra, our traveling Chilean gastronomic journalist, told me that I would be remiss to not mention, there she is in the back, the story of the apples right in the zone where we produce Punta de Fierro, which was an area that was one of the stops on the trip around the Horn when people were shipping goods from the East Coast to the West Coast of the United States and back. And that area was subject to a huge amount of pirate activity, and the entire area was taken over by pirates. And so it was depopulated, not just the settler population, but also the native population. That was in the early to mid 1800s. And then when it was repopulated after that, there were different groups of settlers. And so those apples that are right in the zone that we've been talking about with those little small orchards came down with people of Dutch descent who were coming from Peru to repopulate that area. So there have been many waves of European migration to Chile, and most of the time they were bringing apples with them. We have one question at the back.
Most European cider apples that we end up with over here are extremely susceptible to fire blight. Is that something you guys have to deal with down there? And is the stuff you have down there susceptible to fire blight?
Sela was showing me a photograph this morning that might be fire blight. Yeah, it's happening. She associates that with climate change. I would say, well, Chile has a big exporter of table apples. So the varieties we use for that and agrochemicals that are used and all that. But that type of protection or management is not applied to cideries or cider apples. So I think the good thing is that we've seen these genotypes evolve in an environment without pesticides, so they are naturally resistant or tolerant to these kind of things. Maybe new arrivals of diseases might be a problem for what we have, but having these 450 years of adaptation, I think it's something we've gained in having adaptation to climate and also to diseases.
In the last few days, I've been taken by the diversity and creativity of the ciders that you guys have presented. Is that really only the case of the modern, a new generation of cider makers, or has that always been the case in Chile?
René is a good example for the new generation of the cider maker. This is a third generation of his family. And now maybe Antonio talked about this. The new generation of cider makers is very close to the craft beer. Many brewers is making cider, but it's not too like to making cider like a new world cider. It's a recognized traditional. We have a cider apple trees. This is very special for us. And now the people to learning about the traditional ways to making traditional cider of Chile. We have almost 10 new cider people, young people to making the cider and preserve the culture.
And to be clear, there are a lot of types of traditional cider in Chile. There are innovations that people are doing within just Chicha, just like people who are not associating themselves with the modern cider movement that we're part of. And it would be a whole day's conversation to talk about all the different ways people make Chicha.
how much cross-pollination or collaboration there is with the winemaking community down there in Chicha and cider production. Like, are you finding that there's a lot of cross-collaboration or interest coming across the aisle from winemakers in the region into historical preservation of cider traditions?
Jose is a good example for this. This is a teacher in the university and teach about the winemakers and the cider maker, the mead maker, and the craft beer maker. And many enologists, they have apple cider trees, and a few wineries have a cider. I think in one example have a good perry in Chile, and the enologist is cross. And the community of the craft beverage really not is too big, it's small. The people don't know, and really collaboration. For example, in the case of the Última Cosecha, this is a collaboration really with René, me, and a brewery. And collaboration with brewery, with wineries, is close. And for us, it's very easy to find, for example, reuse barrels for the winery. And collaboration with grapes, for example. We have many grapes, varieties, and disponibility for us. And now the community of the beverage not is wine, craft beer, now this mixed really.
That's a great question. Going back, you would notice that since moving across a long country, very hilly, and it was not easy. So the traditions on wine were separate from the traditions from apple making. There is some overlap in the region of Biobío. It will be very interesting to go and see what methods and knowledge is shared by people making apple chicha or grape chicha. I would say that in Chile, it didn't happen the same as in the Napa Valley, where you would have wineries together with brewing companies, front to front. I would say that we had a long time of this new beer craft movement was back to back to the wine industry. But now students being formed with all these techniques, they are interlinking methods of filtration and doing things like dry hopping with ciders and using honey as in meads. So it's a lot of creativity. And I think we have a public that is growing on trying new things, but also things that have sense, not just creating anything. Sense and tradition. The young people have this hot spot of traditions to go back to and recreate, and that I think that is inspiring us. And since the public is so small there, we would like other people outside Chile to appreciate that.
Your trees, are they mostly older, or are you starting to see more of the modern growing systems like the tall trellis spindle system, trellis systems? And then my second question is, I would be absolutely heartbroken if this is one of the few times that I ever get to try your beautiful ciders. Do you export to the United States?
I'm going to start right away with that second part of that question. Part of the reason why we formed this group is we are looking for partners to help us bring some ciders to the United States. There are a lot of great options, a lot of different markets that we could tap into, and we would really love to work with somebody, if they're interested in working with us, to start bringing cider to the States. If anybody's interested at all in that, please get in touch with me. As for the orcharding questions, I'm going to point to Carlos and to Renee.
About your question about the apples, where in my case, in Punta de Fierro, we use apple trees that has more than 100 years old because they are in the territory, and it's supposed that there is a recipe high in that orchard. Those orchard has around 30 trees in each orchard, in half acres. So we collect that apples once a year, and we produce this kind of cider. But we know that in the territory, there is people that is working with all kind of apple orchard. They are planting new apple orchards. So it's okay, they are reproducing that kind of apple orchard in the territory. And in our case, it's a field blend.
Image on the right
es un huerto de 80 a 100 años.
Is an 80 or 100-year-old orchard.
Esos son los reales huertos de manzanas de sidra en Chile.
Those are the real cider orchards of Chile. But those trees are disappearing in the last few years, and nobody's planting new ones.
Prefieren cortar esos árboles y plantar, no sé, frutillas u otras verduras.
They prefer to cut those trees down and plant strawberries or other vegetables.
La sidra que probaron, la segunda sidra, se llama Muerte Fría y Serena por eso.
The second cider that you tried is called Cold and Serene Death because of that.
This tree is necessary to preserve and sell really cider, and we need to increase to selling cider in the world.
Where we live, all of those orchards were in danger, the ones that we work with, were in danger of being cut down, mainly because people wanted to sell those pieces of their property to people who wanted to build like summer homes and stuff like that. It's very common where we are that people just cut down all the trees and lot out the land. And we feel very proud of the fact that of the orchards that we work with, all of them have started to replant trees that have previously fallen down. All of them have recognized their orchards now, due to the fact that they're working with us and we're able to buy their apples at a higher price, have recognized their orchard as one of the main sources of income for their family systems. And so that is really something that is fundamental to what we're doing here in this project.
To complement the answer to your question is that I think we're not fully aware how the distances between trees and the structure of an orchard has an impact on cider making. So people are getting the same or renewing or replanting with the same genotypes, but in a modern way, like pedestrian alleys, and they are not aware that that makes or doesn't have the advantages of the old cider orchards that are low in nitrogen and the slower fermentations and all that. So I think we have to work on that and convince people that they are replanting in small plots and they want many trees to produce early at second, third or fourth year instead of growing the trees the old ways.
And also I want to add that this kind of old apple orchard has a name, very deeply studied by the University of Valdivia. They call it heritage apple orchard. So that kind of apple orchard has around 30 different kind of apple trees in the same territory. You can find between 10 or 20 kind of apple trees in the same area, because that was the recipe that the guy that put that plant 100 years ago. And also you need to find the recipe, because some of those trees are for cooking. The apple trees are for cooking. So you need to figure out the best way to harvest the right apple trees. That kind of heritage apple orchard are very wild. Some of the trees has more than 40 feet tall, a lot of mosses in the branches, and some of them are in the ground, but still giving apples. So it's very beautiful landscape.
I'm interested in the process by which you were able to form a cooperative and what the challenges were in bringing 16 families together.
The motivation to form the cooperative comes from the fact that the agriculture in Chiloé is very small scale.
Por lo tanto, si queremos hacer algo que sea un poco más, tenga un mejor impacto, tenemos la necesidad de asociarnos.
So in order to have more of an impact, we had to get together and associate.
Para hacer una sociedad como una cooperativa, buscamos destacar nuestros principales valores culturales.
To become a cooperative, we wanted to show our biggest, most valuable cultural values.
Eso tiene relación principalmente con la gran e importante biodiversidad que se puede encontrar no solo de manzanas, sino de todas las especies en Chiloé.
Which has a lot to do with the huge biodiversity that there is not only in apples but also in other plants and animals in Chiloé.
Además de la calidad, porque la agricultura es principalmente ecológica en la isla.
Also the quality, because all of the agriculture that's done on the island is mainly agroecological plantations.
Y bueno, una dificultad muy importante es precisamente tener que abarcar todas las partes de la producción.
One difficulty is to be able to take care of all of the different parts of the production.
Es decir, nosotros somos productores y estamos resguardando que no se siga perdiendo la diversidad de ecotipos de manzana.
Is that while we're producing, we're also making sure that we are not losing any of the ecotypes of apple.
Además, paralelamente estamos aprendiendo cómo hacer un producto de mejor calidad para poder abrir un mercado de sidras en la región.
At the same time, we had to learn how to make a higher quality product in order to open up more markets in the region. And one of the big issues that we have is that the people who are still in the countryside, who are staying in the countryside, are getting older and older, and they can no longer necessarily do all of the work necessary to maintain their orchards and their production.
I want to add, don't forget that this place is an island without a bridge and with rainforest, lakes, river. So the biodiversity in that place is enormous. It's a beautiful place.
Where are you guys seeing success with craft cider in Chile, and how is that market developing, and how much of a presence is cider compared to beer and wine?
The main source of sales is direct from the cidery to the public.
Y ahora, en estos últimos 5 años, algunos bares de Santiago, de cerveza principalmente, distribuyen cidras.
In the last few years, a few bars, especially beer bars, have started to distribute ciders as well.
En Chile es más popular, hay muchos bares de vinos, pero es muy difícil introducir sidra en esos bares, principalmente porque la sidra tiene, no sé, Brett y cosas así que en el vino no son de su gusto.
There are a lot of wine bars in Santiago, but it's very hard to enter because they don't understand the cider and they find faults like Brett that were actually intentional. Some cideries have managed to export at the Latin American level, for example, to Brazil. It's very difficult to sell directly to normal consumers because they don't understand what cider is and they prefer beer and kombucha.
Our cider house, we produce around 2,000 gallons per year. It's not too much. That we can do with the apple that we have in the territory. So we decide as a Punta de Fierro cider to sell our cider like a wine. That is why we are using that kind of bottle, and it is still also. So the idea was to use that quantities, not too much, to pairing in some restaurant in Patagonia or Santiago, the capital city, because we think that is the best pairing that we can use sometime for some meals. For example, in Patagonia, we have a lot of lamb. Lamb, pork is a beautiful option if you want to pairing. So that was our decision because we don't have too much bottles for sale.
We have time for one more question.
I feel honored to have the last question. Hey, I'm wondering, with the traditional orchards, these old orchards, is there a generational gap now with the kids not wanting to carry on the tradition and letting these farms, just get plowed over because money's more important? Is that a problem there? Because I've seen it in Europe with some cideries and breweries as well.
In our case, that is why we are working in a line as a apple wine. So that is why we are working in that line, because we want to improve the price, because there is a huge story in all those cider that is beautiful. That is why we are here telling you our story. And also in our case, we are trying to pay better for each apple, work together with the community, and also we open a summer school in our apple orchard. It's an edible apple orchard, edible forest apple orchard. So today you can see in summer kids playing around of our apple orchard. So we are working together with the university and also the government to improve this business and show the story that we have in this territory. But the first job is to show that to the people from Chile, to the Chilean people.
The reason why is because, yes, effectively, like the average age in the Chilean countryside every year goes up by 1 year pretty much. It's only an exodus. There are a few examples of people coming back to the countryside, but it's a dire situation, and that's why each of us are here doing what we're doing.
Well, I would love to add that mainly are women that are working on that, because they are saving, keep saving that old apple orchard. That is beautiful job. So thanks women.
Yeah, and just as a few closing remarks, I want to talk about what's next. As Cosichi, our main pillars in order to be able to achieve our mission of making Chile into the cider capital of Latin America are through education. We want to educate, bring all of this incredible science and knowledge about cider making that's been done in the US and the UK to Chile to help people understand how they can improve their ciders with our native fruit, and through international connections. So we hope to bring Chilean ciders as much as we can to international forums, but also to bring all of you down to Chile, working with RIA, making a cider tour, doing all kinds of different things that we could do together to be able to bring everybody down to Chile, and through showing Chilean cider on the international forum, hopefully show Chileans that they have something really special.
Find the show notes for this here episode by going to ciderchat.com, look up episode 486, or put in the little search box that you'll find there. You type it in, and you'll see something like Chilean cider, and up will come this episode and some other ones. Yes, we are following Chile along and working on getting Cider Chat down there. So do stay tuned. Hit the follow button, subscribe to Cider Chat for all the different updates coming. And don't forget, while you're online, make sure that you check out the upcoming Totally Cider tours. I would love to raise a glass with you out and about in Ciderville. And with that, I leave you here. This is Ria Windcaller signing off for now. Looking forward to seeing you in Ciderville.
Drink it like this. There is a reason why we do it like this.
Yeehaw!